Welcome to the Creek Road Baptist Pulpit. These weekly podcasts feature expository messages delivered to edify the soul. Now let's join Pastor Dave as he presents this week's message. You take your Bible and join me as we turn to Mark's Gospel. Mark chapter 1. Look at verse 29, and we're going to read 29 through 34. 29 through 34. And forthwith, when they were come out of the synagogue, they entered into the house of Simon and Andrew with James and John. But Simon's wife's mother lay sick of a fever, and anon they tell him of her. And he came and took her by the hand and lifted her up, and immediately the fever left her, and she ministered unto them. And at even, when the sun did set, they brought unto him all that were diseased, and them that were possessed with devils, and all the city was gathered together at the door. And he healed many that were sick of divers diseases, and cast out many devils, and suffered not the devils to speak, because they knew him. So what do you do when you go home from church? Yeah, take a nap. This is a story about not a Sunday afternoon, but Sabbath for these folks was a Saturday, and they had gone to synagogue. And if you notice, beginning there in verse 21, I think it's verse 21, yeah. They went into Capernaum, and straightway on the Sabbath day entered into the synagogue and taught. So Jesus has his disciples with him, at least four of them, Simon, Andrew, James, John. They go to the synagogue, and Jesus is teaching. And they were astonished at his doctrine, for he taught them as one that had authority, not as the scribes. And there was in their synagogue a man with an unclean spirit, and he cried out, saying, Let us alone, what have we to do with thee, thou Jesus of Nazareth? Art thou come to destroy us? I know thee whom thou art, the Holy One of God. And Jesus rebuked him, saying, Hold thy peace, and come out of him. And when the unclean spirit had torn him and cried with a loud voice, he came out of him. And they were all amazed, inasmuch as they questioned among themselves, saying, What thing is this? What new doctrine is this? For with authority commanded he even the unclean spirits that they obey him. So Jesus had gone to the synagogue with his disciples. They had synagogue worship, read the scripture, Jesus taught, and then this demon-possessed man stands up and speaks. Jesus heals the man. And then afterwards, what do you do with your preacher after service? Well, Peter said, come on home and let's have lunch. And so they went to Peter's house. And they're going off to Peter's house. Peter is in Capernaum. That's where he's from. And Andrew, his brother, and James and John. And so Capernaum is right there on the northern part of the Sea of Galilee. And from that little spot, the land just goes straight up from the sea. So the city is just built in terraces on that spot. And at the very top, there's a little lane where houses were built. And this was the generational home of Simon and Andrew. And you just think about it. From what we read in this passage, no doubt that Peter's mom was there, maybe his dad, in this house. Also, Peter's wife was there. Peter's wife's mom was there because we're told that she was ill. And because she's there in Peter's house, in Simon's house, with his wife, that probably means that Peter's wife's dad has passed, so the mom has come to live with her. Of course, there's grandchildren there, children and grandchildren there as well. And don't forget Andrew. He may have had a wife, and his wife may have had her mom there. And maybe we have his children as well. And maybe there are sisters that haven't married yet that are also there. This is a busy house. It's a generational home. So you've got all these folks coming, and so Peter invites the master to come to his house. And we can imagine this nice lunch being served by the women in the home for the teacher and his new disciples. Sort of a kind of a celebration for their decision to follow Jesus. And that was a big deal. That was a big deal for a man in that culture to decide to follow a rabbi and become his disciple. It was a very big deal. And so Peter and Andrew, James and John have left their worldly employment. They've left their trade, so now that they can study at the feet of this rabbi named Jesus. I've stood in this house, or what they think is Peter's house. I've been there. Of course, there are no walls any longer. There's no more roof. It's just foundations. But I've actually been there. The researchers, the archaeologists who did the work there found fishing hooks there in the house, and so that's why they named it Peter's house. They found a lot of fishing. So fishermen lived there. So it may have been Peter, may have been somebody else. If it was Peter's house, I stood in the doorway, in this doorway that Jesus entered through. I stood in the place where the city gathered and where many were healed. And that's just a doorway. There's no thing there any longer. It's just, all you can tell is the foundation ends over here and then begins again here, and you've got a stone stoop. So you know that that's where the door was. And it's, that doorway is just like the doorway at your house. It's just a entranceway, squared thing, with a door. Would have been a door there, and a knob and a latch and all the rest, so that you could come and go. And there it is right there. But that doorway is no more special than your doorway if you're a believer. And I know that you are, and you've taken the Lord Jesus home with you too, and He's entered through your door. And which is more important, the miracles that happened at that doorway, or the one who does the miracles who entered through your doorway? The one who does the miracles. That's what's important. It's easy for us to, create shrines, places of special importance around things like Peter's house, because we know Jesus was in that place. But really, that place is no more special than your place here in Ohio in the 21st century, because Jesus makes every place special. So they come home after a day at church. Let's just put it like that. If this was a preschool sermon, we would say Jesus went to church, and they went to Peter's house for lunch afterwards. And so they're going to Peter's house, and it's going to be wonderful, and it's going to be a lovely time, and lots of people are going to be there, and they're all going to be celebrating Jesus, and they're going to be celebrating Peter and Andrew and James and John and their decision to follow Jesus. But all's not well at Peter's house. The dark cloud of disease was hanging like a curtain over everything. They came for a lunch, and the senior lady in the house who could make the best biscuits is sick. You may not have a sick mother-in-law at home, but maybe you've got a sin-sick child. Perhaps you've got a backslidden family member, or perhaps a heathen spouse. Or there may be some circumstance in your life that is making everyone in your home figuratively sick. Whatever the problem is, we understand Peter as he draws closer and closer to your home. As much as we try to straighten up our homes for company, we can't cover up the need that resides in our homes. And while we might get away with it when we invite others to our house and everything looks clean and pretty and put in its place, Jesus knows, doesn't he? He knows what's really going on. And I'm sure the place was spotless. I'm sure Peter told his wife, I'm bringing the master home. And I'm sure that his wife, if she went to synagogue that day, she might have left just a little bit early so she could make sure that everybody had done what she told them to do. Put things away, make the food, get stuff ready. I'm sure that was all happening. The place, I'm sure, was just as ready to receive the master as it would be for us. But the closer they got to the door, the quieter the foursome got. And they all knew. Peter, of course, felt it the most because it's his wife's mom. He feels the pain of her illness the deepest. And then Andrew. And James and John were their partners in business, but I'm sure that they knew what was going on in the house as well, and they felt it. And the closer they get to the house, the quieter they become, because they know once they get to the house, they're going to have to handle the sadness that waited on the inside. Now, you notice that it says that Simon's wife's mother lay sick of a fever there in verse 30. So she can't get up. And we all understand this one, don't we? But we've been sick of fevers. It's amazing what a fever will do to the human body. It drains us of strength. It imprisons us in our own beds. And we can't get comfortable. We're either sweating bullets or it's so cold we think that the world's going to freeze over. And we can't get warm. And it's just back and forth and back and forth. And it just drains us of strength and vitality. And really it affects our minds. It affects everything. Fevers are horrible. And this poor lady was in bed with a fever. And so she's really suffering and probably had been for some time. And you'll notice that there in verse 30, the last phrase says, and anon, they tell him of her. What was it that they did? That word anon in the King James is not one that we know much about. The Greek word means immediately or straightway. Some of your translations will have at once. So as soon as Jesus walks through that door, walks across that lovely stone stoop and into Peter's house, which I'm sure was, ready for the party, except for the one lady upstairs who was sick in bed. As soon as they walked in, something happened. And it says, they tell him of her. I don't know who the they is. Maybe we could assume that it's Peter and Andrew. It's James and John. Maybe as soon as they walked through the door, Peter said, look, Master, I've got to be honest with you. My mother-in-law is sick. Of course, Jesus knew. He knew what was happening in the house. And don't you know, his heart must have leaped at the chance to bless his disciple. But he was waiting. He was waiting for them to say it. And as soon as they walked in, maybe Peter's wife ran up to him and said, did you tell the Master yet? Did you tell him yet? Have you said anything yet? And then everybody in the house gathers around. And maybe they tell him the whole story about how she got sick. Andrew's is sharing. And John and James are telling how it's affected Peter. And the servants, maybe they're saying something. The children, maybe they're saying something. And Peter's mom, maybe she's imploring Jesus to, this is a lovely woman. She's just we can't do without her in this house. All of these people have gathered around the Master with one voice. All of them are telling Jesus about this lady. She's marvelous. She's wonderful. We love her. And she's so sick, Jesus. And she sends her regrets that she can't come down to see you in person. So they tell him all about her. You remember that old hymn? I must tell Jesus all of my sorrows. I cannot bear these burdens alone. I must tell Jesus. I must tell Jesus. Jesus. Jesus alone. He's entered the house, and the house will never be the same again. The people in the house don't know that yet, but they will, because they will never be the same again either. The question I ask of myself as I read this and of you, my listeners, is, are you telling Jesus about it? Have you spoken to him? His sweet sympathy draws out their need just like an old-fashioned poultice. I don't know why we don't use those more today. I remember as a boy, my mom's favorite poultice was a baking powder poultice. She put that on everything. And if I had a bug bite or a sting or something like that, went to the cabinet, pulled down that baking powder, made a paste with it, and slathered it on, and put a bandage over the top of it. And it would get all crusty and dry, and the pieces would crumble and fall out. But you know what it did? It drew that poison right out of the sting. Jesus walks in, and he is the poultice. He walks in, and his sweetness and his kindness draw out from all those gathered in that house all the pain of this woman's sickness. And now that they have told him about her, what does he do? He goes right to work. Notice there in verse 31, and he came. Now he's already there. He's in the house. So he's in that place. They're telling him about the lady, but it says, and he came. So what does he do? He just marches right upstairs. He moves in the direction of heaven. He went directly to her room, opened the door, moved in beside her bed. He didn't care that she had a fever. He knew all about it anyway. He marched right in and took her by the hand. Oh, friend, Isn't this why we tell Jesus about it? We wanted to take us by the hand. Oh, the wonderful condescension of Christ. He touches the leper. He puts his hands on the blind. He touches the lame, the one sick of a fever. He goes in and he takes her by the hand. Oh, can't you just see her laying on that bed with those glassed over, feverish eyes, tears streaming out, not because she's in tears, but because the fever has forced the liquid out of her eyes. And through those glazy eyes, she looks up at this one who's looking down on her, holding her hand. And what does he do? He lifts her up. Now, if you've ever been sick with a fever, you know how this would hurt. If somebody were to come in and just grab you and pull you up out of the bed, just imagine how that would hurt to try to stand up. But Jesus does, but it doesn't hurt her. She couldn't have done this on her own, but when he does this, he pulls the fever right out and leaves her standing as perfectly whole as you or I. Perfectly healed and ready to make biscuits. And notice what it says there, how this whole interchange ends. Immediately, here's Mark's favorite word, immediately the fever left. Of course it did. Of course it did. The fever left when he came in. It can't stay any longer. He moves in beside her, takes her hand and lifts her up, and fever's gone. How wonderful our Master is. Of course it left. He does all things well. And why is it that you haven't told Jesus about that issue at home yet? Is it because you don't think he'll do anything about it? Oh, you know he will. He's there. And there's something you need to tell him. Don't hold back. He's waiting for you to tell him all about it so that he can take you by the hand, or he can take that sick person by the hand and lift them up. What's the result? She ministered unto them. That's why I keep going back to the biscuits, because it just wasn't to Jesus, but it was everybody in the house. And why shouldn't they share in this marvelous healing? Because they told Jesus about her, so now she is healed and ready to go, and she is ministering to them, to Jesus plus Peter, Andrew, James, John, the wife, the children, the servants, all of them. The senior lady in the house is now back in charge. This seems to be what happens to folk who experience the deliverance of Christ Jesus. It wasn't just Jesus who was ministered to, but all that told him about her. What a grand salvation this represents. And you'll notice that they couldn't keep what happened in the house a secret. And then Mark's all about secrets. There's two things in the Gospel of Mark that you're going to find over and over again. Number one, he tells everybody, don't tell anybody about this. And number two, this idea of immediacy. Now, who knows how long it took, but it didn't take that long because it was evening when the door was filled with folks. So they couldn't keep it a secret, and maybe the servants are out back talking to each other across the fence, about what Jesus has done. And that, how news travels like that, right? It travels faster than the telegraph lines. It travels faster than the internet. When you have people telling people, and suddenly the entire town of Capernaum is filled with this news that Peter's wife's mom has been completely healed of that fever that they thought was going to kill her. And now she's in the kitchen making biscuits for everybody. And she made the best biscuits in Capernaum. And the fellow down the street, way down the street, who's lame in his feet, decides, maybe I can hobble down to Peter's house on Main Street and just ask if I could see Jesus. And maybe somebody down the street on the other end of town heard that what happened to Peter's wife's mom-in-law, and she's going to come, and she's got a sickness that she needs to be healed of, some growth on her side. And there's some guy with a demonic son who's just torn up everything in the city, and he's going to bring him. Maybe if I could just see Jesus. And suddenly the doorway is filled. Notice verse 32. At even when the sun did set, they brought in him all that were diseased, and then them that were possessed with devils. So the hospital that was a hospital now becomes a place of deliverance for all the needy in the city because of one simple telling. That's it. When they walked in the door, straightway they told him of her. Because of that and what Jesus does in the house, suddenly this house becomes a blessing for the entire town. This entire town is blessed, and Peter's house goes from this hospital for a feverish woman to a place of deliverance for all the folk in the city. And the question I have for me and for you today is, how could my house bless my city? Well, it begins with prayer. You never know what the Lord might do with each one of us, but it begins with Jesus walking through your doorway and you telling him all about it.
Jesus will meet you.
Thanks for listening to this week's message. Please join us again next time for another installment of the Creek Road Baptist Pulpit.